Rebecca Riddel is policy lead for economic and racial justice for Oxfam America, and she joins me now live from New York. Rebecca, thank you for joining us. This new report shows that the world's wealthiest 5 men have more than doubled their fortune, while nearly 800 million workers have failed to keep up with inflation. How does the report explain the extraordinary growth of billionaire wealth at the top of the economy that we're seeing this decade, while 60% of the world has been made poorer?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me on. It's a real pleasure to be here. Yes, and globally, as you saw in the clip that just preceded this, we're really facing a new Gilded Age. It's a decade that's been defined by division, with those at the top experiencing just astronomical growth, while the vast majority are left behind. And during that same time, as you said, 60% of the world's population has gotten poorer. And we have to remember that for many, this has been a really challenging decade with a pandemic that devastated lives and economies, with an extended cost of living crisis, with climate breakdown and more, workers' wages failing to keep up with inflation. Billionaires, on the other hand, many of them have never done better. Their wealth overall is up. As we see, the growth of the five richest men has more than doubled. And the thing is, those men are winners of a global economy that's built to redistribute wealth upwards. So, the thing we need to recognize, and what we really focus on in this year's report, is how corporate and monopoly power is at the heart of this model.
Well, give us a bit more details there. What does that mean exactly, this underestimated role of corporate power, like you say?
Yeah, what we found is that billionaire wealth on the one hand and corporate power on the other hand are intimately connected. A really increasingly small number of increasingly powerful corporations are redistributing wealth upwards, essentially enriching a class of modern day men. I mean, if you look, for example, at the top 10 biggest companies in the world, a billionaire is either running or the principal shareholder of seven of them. And we found that corporate power is, reaping record profits around the world right now, but also driving inequality economy wide, including along lines of race and gender. They're dodging taxes, paying out 8 out of every $10 in record profits to shareholders, and driving the climate crisis.
Right. And we're seeing, I mean, some of the numbers are incredible. Like Apple, for example, we heard your director say earlier, is valued at more than the GDP of France. But again, much of the world is struggling. Wage growth has not kept up with inflation. Prices are up. Just explain to us a bit more. Why has inflation not had as big an effect on big corporations?
Yeah. Inflation has, in some ways, enabled corporations to use their outsized market power to really command record profits. So, we've just experienced decades of rising corporate concentration that have really ushered in a new global era of monopoly power. And now monopolies corner industries from food to tech to pharma, and that gives them a lot of power over our everyday lives and economies. It gives them the ability to decide what food we're going to eat, to decide what wages will be paid. And so what we see is that a really small number of ultra powerful firms are able to funnel massive amounts of money to wealthy shareholders while they're doing it at the expense of ordinary people through using their power to drive down wages, dodging taxes, and so on.
So the report says, and you were mentioning this earlier, that the wealth gap has been, quote, supercharged since the pandemic. Just explain that to us. Why?
Yeah, at this point, after the last very few tough years that most people have had, progress against global poverty has largely stalled. We found the wealth of the bottom 60% of humanity actually fell in the last 3 years. But then if you look at what's happening at the top, you just see astronomical growth. Take the five richest men, right? So that's Elon Musk, Bernard Arnault, Jeff Bezos, Larry Ellison, and Warren Buffett. Their portfolios have done amazingly. They're up above $800 billion with a growth rate of 114% in the last 3 years. And that really matches in many ways the record profits the companies have made at the same time. So, if you look at the top about 148 countries, or companies rather, we found that they just raked in $1.8 trillion, which is 52% up on their average profits.
So what's the answer then? I mean, how do you rein in these corporate and billionaire power plays?
Yeah, we believe we need a new era of public action. That it's really only public power that can rein in extreme wealth and billionaire power and corporate power. So even champions of the corporate sector recognize that things need to change. And companies can take voluntary steps, and they absolutely should. But we also need governments that are dynamic, accountable, and effective to really step up. If governments shape the market to be fair, if they break up monopolies, empower workers, and really tax corporations and the ultra wealthy, well, that type of decisive regulation will make a real difference. We're also calling to reinvent the business model. So, you see social enterprises and co-ops that are showing you can have dynamic, effective businesses that much more democratically share the proceeds than the sort of, shareholder capitalism model we're used to. And then finally, and crucially, we're calling on governments to embrace and invest in public services. We don't need to leave everything we care about to the whims of private equity and billionaire monopoly men. We can really build strong public services that deliver for all. So, on the one hand, we are living in a global gilded age, but on the other, a more equal world certainly is possible. We're seeing examples of the type of inequality busting policies being put in place today, and we're really optimistic about what it will look like if we adopt those more widely.
Rebecca, just to wrap up very briefly, is there a best in class already, a country or a company that can be held as an example for the rest?
I would love to highlight the incredible work of workers right now, and they have been not only, especially the essential workers, working really hard during the pandemic to take care of so many people. And I include in those workers the many unpaid carers around the world. So I think I'd love to single out, their leadership in recent years as, organizers, as people really making our economies work. And on the other hand, we do see governments that are stepping up and really doing good work. So I'm thinking of, the level of ambition of the US government in suing Amazon for its use of monopoly power, or the leadership shown by African countries that are stepping up at the UN saying we need a new international tax architecture. And so really around the world, whether it's, activists in the streets or governments that are really stepping up, we are seeing cause for hope.
All right, Rebecca, thank you for that. Rebecca Riddel, the policy lead for economic and racial justice at Oxfam America. Thank you.
Thank you.